By request from Knucklehead, who's very near and dear to this channel, let's take a look at another GM. Let's take a look at one Bob Gainey's time in Montreal, shall we? By popular request. 03 to 2010, a time that I know quite well. Let's go back to the very beginning. So his first ever trade was, and here, I can take these out because there's no music playing for the moment. Danny Stewart and Oscar Korpakari for Andreas Valdix. That's a wash. Kovalev for Balej and Bruce Graham. Yeah. Gainey won that one. Even, I mean, in fairness, because, trust me, I remember the 04 fucking Montreal run well enough. Thanks, Mike Ribeiro, for fucking diving. I wish you nothing but the best. But yeah, obviously Montreal won that. Jim Dowd for Julian Sprunger. I mean, Jim Dowd was a pretty solid NHLer, so that's, yeah, they won that one too. That's a wash. Vidareni? And fuck it, it's a wash. Radek Bonk and Cristobal Huey for Matthew Guerin and Paul Bier. You got to give that to Montreal too. I don't recall Matthew Guerin being this dominant force in Los Angeles. So, future considerations for the right to Stefan Quintal. I don't know what the future considerations ever became. We can try to look that up. I do know Stefan Quintal was an okay defenseman. I don't recall him doing anything in Los Angeles, though. Let's see. It doesn't say anything for the future considerations. So, I don't know. Like, offhand, you'd be like, well, at least Los Angeles got a player. He never even played for LA. The lockout kicked in, and then he retired. So, that's the definition of a wash. Definition. Guillaume Latendresse for Marc-Andre Cliche, the Cliche, and Brody Dupont. I'd give it to Montreal. They got the best player in the deal. Cliche wasn't bad. I mean, you know, played for Los Angeles most recently before he retired. He played for the Marlies. I remember that. But I mean, yeah, I'd give it to Montreal. But obviously, Latendresse's career kind of fell apart from concussions. I remember him more as a member of the Wild than of the Habs. Garth Murray from Marcel Hossa. It really would depend on what each did at the time. And I mean, Murray didn't do much. He was there for like 2 seasons and played less than a season's worth of games. And with Marcel Hossa in New York, it's a wash. It's not like either player did that much. They traded Jose Theodore for David Abisher. I don't even remember David Abisher being a Hab. I really don't. 43 appearances, 32 appearances, 7 appearances post-lockout. He was a .900 save percentage goalie both years. And then went to Phoenix and then left. Jose Theodore in Colorado, let's see, nothing? I mean, he played a couple of seasons there, but that's it. I mean, it's kind of a wash. Maybe Theodore had the slightly better career as an Av, but it's not a major trade. Todd Simpson for Chris Auger, that's a nothing trade. Again, Montreal, I don't recall in 06 going on any cup runs, so David Fisher and Matthew Carl for Ty Wishart. I mean, Matthew Carl and Wishart were both kind of the same, just in terms of like, okay, you know, 7th defenseman who could fill the role once in a while. Wishart was more of a Islander than a Shark, from what I remember. Ryan White for Jonathan Matsumoto and Jakub Kovar. You're lucky that's Kovar and not Voracek. But, I mean, Ryan White, Montreal wins that trade, no doubt. Matsumoto wasn't even a flyer for that long, if I'm remembering right. Mike Johnson for Ruzicka. Montreal probably wins that one too. Might be closer to a wash, but at best, like that, for Arizona, that's the trade where it's like, at best, it's a wash. Olivier Fortier for Richard Zednik. I mean, I'm not sure why they would have traded Zednik at the time. 14 points in 67 games, played 32 games in Washington, then left. It's a wash. You could give it to Washington. You probably couldn't give it to Montreal. So it's still kind of a nothing deal. Yanni Nienema and Andrew Comboy for Mike Ribeiro and Tasson. I mean, Nienema didn't do anything in Montreal, did he? He played 41 games, whereas Mike Ribeiro was pretty good for the Stars for quite a few seasons. So, yeah, Montreal loses that one, for sure. Andrew Comboy never became anything. Matthew Baron for Patrick Traverse. That's a nothing trade. Then you get a real interesting one. Josh Georges and the pick that became Max Pacioretty for Greg Rive and Julian Demers. If it was Jason Demers, it would be interesting. It's not. It was just for Greg Rive. That's a Montreal win. So I guess what we're discovering already is that Bob Gainey has pretty fucking good record. Greg Rive was okay in Montreal, but he didn't do much in San Jose. He didn't really do much. I mean, well, in fairness, 07-08, 35 points in 74 games. But obviously the Sharks were never... I mean, they were competing, but they never got there. Sorry, Sinsky. But, yeah, I mean, come on. Even if they ended up dealing Georges later, and Max Pacioretty's gone now too, that's a win for Montreal. Rights to Ryan Russell for David Skokin. It's a wash. Yasin Kolomor and Tony Salomalainen for Sergei Samsonov, who didn't really do shit in Chicago. He played 23 games and spent some time in Rockford. So that's a wash. I mean, Kolomor was like a decent depth defenseman at this point. He never played a game for Montreal, though. Yeah, so, I mean, Montreal loses that trade, but it's not like that's a major deal. Samsonov he didn't do much in Chicago, unfortunately. Still love him, though. Scott Kishel for Michael Leighton. I'm going to give that one to Carolina, even though Michael Leighton didn't do anything really on the Hurricanes, but he did end up going to Philadelphia, which proved to be somewhat beneficial for them. So, yeah, I'll give that one to Carolina, but it's not a major loss. Brett Engelhart for Francis Lemieux. It's a wash. The pick that became Jeremy Morin for Cristobal Huet. It's also a bit of a wash. I don't really recall Huet doing much in Washington. He played 13 games. That's it. So, and Jeremy Morin never really was able to hold down a job in the NHL level. So, that's a nothing deal. Olivier Latendresse for Corey Urquhart. It's a wash. Alex Tanguay, Maxim Trunev from Calgary for what became Greg Nemish and Stefan Elliott. Neither Nemish or Elliott really carved out a full-time NHL spot. Elliott's done well over in Switzerland, I know that. Granted, Tanguay was past his prime at this point, and only played 50 games, but he had 41 points in 50 games. So granted, he didn't stay there long, but yeah, Montreal wins that deal. Mikhail Grabovski for Greg Pateryn and the pick that became Jared Knight. Good old Jared Knight, a name near and dear to my heart. I mean, yeah, they ended up trading Greg Pateryn for Jamie Benn. Jordy Benn. You fucking wish it was for Jamie Benn. They ended up trading him for Jordy Benn, so that is what it is. Grabovski was a better Leaf than Pateryn was a Hab, although I did say when Pateryn was dealt to Dallas that I thought they kind of made a mistake because I liked Greg Pateryn a little bit more than Ben based on the stats at the time. And then, of course, the Jared Knight pick ended up being in Boston. So, I don't know. The Leafs win that one, but they never did anything with Grabovski, so it's not a major win. Sean Bell for Corey Locke is a nothing trade. They got Robert Lang for the pick that became Jared Knight, which again moved because that was a Boston selection. So Montreal wins that just by default. Although I don't know what Chicago ended up getting for that pick. Because like I said, that ended up being a Bruins pick somehow. Let's see, what did he do in Montreal? 50 games, 39 points. Yeah, Montreal won that one. TJ Kemp for, I mean, that's a wash, but I guess Montreal wins because they actually got something. Matthew Schneider for the pick to be, or for Jeremy Morin and Julian Melchiori. I'm going to say Montreal wins that one because, again, Jeremy Morin bounced around a lot. Melchiori's played some games for the Jets, but that's nothing, really. And, I mean, at that point, Schneider was kind of dumb, but he had 17 points in 23 games. So Montreal wins it, but it's not a major win. Doug Janik for Steve Bejan. I mean, I give it to Dallas just for the fact that Steve Bejan was the better player. He had 2 points in 20 games with Dallas, but he didn't do much. Doug Janik in Montreal had 2 games played. So, yeah, Dallas won that one, but it's not like it was a big deal. Petri Samila for Kevin Lind. That's a nothing deal. Oh, boy. Now we get to the real main event, don't we? You know what? Let's save that one for last. Benoit Pouliot for Guillaume Latendresse. I mean, Montreal wins that one. Pouliot was the better player at that point. I'm pretty sure by this point, Latendresse was already starting to be ruined by concussions. I don't know. I think it was a Players Tribune article about Latendresse. He's had it rough for a while. He did okay in Minnesota, and then it kind of just fell apart. Whereas Benoit Pouliot in Montreal didn't really do all that much. 24 points in 39 games is pretty solid. Next year, 30 points in 79 games, and then ended up being a Bruin. So, yeah, that goes to Montreal. And then Magnus Nygren for Kyle Chipchura. I mean, Chipchura is the better player, but that's not a major win. Which means, I mean, so far, if you were to say, like, hey, what do you think about Bob Gainey as a GM? Pretty good. Pretty good. I mean, there really aren't any trades here I'd be like, holy shit, you lost that one, right? If anything, the Pacioretty trade was a big win. But this is the one that defines his legacy, I'd say. Tom Pyatt, Scott Gomez, and Michael Busto for Pavel Valentanko, Ryan McDonough, Doug Janik, and Christopher Higgins. Now, Valentanko and Doug Janik, I mean, those weren't the worst players to give up, right? Those are nothing. Chris Higgins, that is the Chris Higgins that ended up being in Vancouver. I don't know what the Rangers ended up doing, but he only spent 55 games there before going to Vancouver. So pretty much for the Rangers, and again, you can't be like, oh, well, the Rangers ended up getting this for Chris Higgins, so factor that into the trade. It's kind of unfair, because again, you'd have to go Steve Dangle full trade tree. It's like, well, okay, well, what happened with the pick that was traded for Higgins? Oh, well, it turns out that was dealt by Chicago, and then, okay, well, what did Chicago get? Like, we're not doing that. We're looking at the individual trades, because this is what I was asked to do, so fuck it. You pretty much have to look at this as Tom Pyatt and Scott Gomez for Ryan McDonough. You know who won this trade. You know who won this trade. Now, in fairness to one Bob Gainey, Ryan McDonough had not yet played a game. He had an 18-point season in 43 games at the University of Wisconsin, 16 points in 36 games. It's a crapshoot. That is one of those deals, and I talked about the Nick, and again, this is going to be weird if I put this up on YouTube, and people are like, oh, what's your opinion on the Nick Suzuki trade? Because that's a whole different debate. But it's the opinion that I have with trades where it's a fucking prospect. It's magic beans. You just don't know. Even if a player does well. Again, we looked at OHL leading scorers where from 10 years ago where Luka Caputi outscored Steven Stamkos. It doesn't mean much. But, yeah, it didn't work out. And I mean, Scott Gomez, at the time, had 58 points in 77 games. Had 70 points in 81 games the year before. And, 59 points in 78 games in his first season as a Hab, but obviously it fell apart quickly. So, I mean, at the time, you can kind of see what he was going for with this trade, but obviously it very much did not work out. That is really the only trade where I'm like, wow, okay, you done goofed. But that is kind of the trade that defines Bob Gainey's legacy, isn't it? Now, this is the point in the video where I'd tack on an ending, because why the hell not? It's the ending. If this goes up on YouTube, this is the ending. Goodbye.